Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What Lies in the Sunday Telegraph, another special air quality bushfire issue in this new era in which we find ourselves. Thank you for joining us as we read the Sunday Telegraph. Look, for now, I think the bushfire accoutrements are going to have to come off. Not that the air quality's actually gotten any better. Excuse my hair's doing something odd today. And of course, I had to shave the beard off to safely fit a smoke mask, and that's not fooling around or hypochondria. That's days and weeks of hazardous rated air quality. So, looking a bit less slick, I grant you. Here we are. What does Australia's #1 selling newspaper have to say? Okay, we've opened with Disaster Special, the bushfire's hidden toll. Interestingly, they've used the word bushfire apostrophe S, so it's a singular bushfire. Some might think that we have more than one, and bushfires, then an apostrophe after the S might have been more appropriate. We have a photogenic young woman, and in my view, somewhat tastelessly, in fact, we learn she's died. Teenage student Courtney Partridge McLennan is one of the unspoken victims of New South Wales bushfire catastrophe. The 19-year-old died alone from a severe asthma attack when her hometown of Glen Innes was blanketed in thick smoke. Experts warn the health impact of the bushfires is immeasurable. That's my smoke mask. And also we have Terrorists No More. In 2008, he went to prison over a terror plot to blow up targets in Sydney and Melbourne. Today, Mazen Tuma's painting houses and says he's a changed man. I was on the wrong path. So, the inside story of our first de-radicalised prisoner, Avid Benny Morrison, reports it on page 6 and 7. There's also some pointers to Operation Sweet Potato, a rescue plan for starving wildlife, and a before and after the devastation left behind photo special, page 14. Right, carving up Burgess Inc. This is Sam Burgess splitting with his wife, the rugby league player. Family home sells. Very important news. That'll save some lives. And I'd love to go there. 100 mind-blowing destinations. A free glossy escape wish list edition. Because the business of advertising never sleeps. On the inside page, for those unfamiliar with it, we get what's called Mix Picks, the editor's best, which is where the editor of the Sunday Telegraph chooses the very best things that are in his newspaper, Australia's #1 selling newspaper, that he thinks people might want to know about. So the double escape wish list, the free glossy bumper holiday special, that's #1. #2 is 20 new health trends you need to try in 2020. #3 is we rate the best diets of 2020. #4 is moderately news-like. That's where we get It's All About Harry, as most aim their arsenal at Meghan Markle, blaming her for Prince Harry's virtual abdication from the royal family. He was only sixth in line to the throne. It could be that it's all his fault. Today we look at the fallout of the young couple's decision to step away from official duties, why it happened, and what it means to everyone else, particularly the youngest king in waiting, Prince George. Doesn't mean anything to Prince George whatsoever, I imagine, except he sees his uncle a bit less. But it's not like there aren't plenty of people for him to see. #5 is the 10 cricketers to change the game. #6 is Stella, the trends that will add the wow factor to your home. Renovation trends in a glossy fashion magazine. They've really run out of glossy fashion, haven't they? And the Revolutionaries, #7. It's going to be a massive year in television with some new heavyweight suits, gallery of big stars, and some odd little programs that are going to change what we watch forever. Given that almost no one's watching broadcast TV at all, I don't think it's going to change things very much in the slightest. Right, #3, we have some news. Iran, we shot down plane by mistake. Iran has announced that its military unintentionally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner that crashed earlier this week, killing all 176 aboard. Now, let's remember that airliners getting shot down in the Middle East, and also Ukraine, which is a weird little tie-in to this that I suspect might have some bearing sooner rather than later. Remember the Americans shot down an Iranian airliner, I think around 20 years ago, maybe a little longer ago. And if you're a keyed up air defense person, an airliner as a blip on the screen does look a lot like a jet fighter. And then it depends what the transponders were set to, which I imagine there'll be claim and counterclaim. The Iranians are entirely capable of lying. The Americans have a proven track record of lying in these things. I wouldn't believe anything coming out of an official briefing. Well, I mean, obviously some things in an official briefing are going to be true because the kernel of truth is where they start. But don't believe it's true because it's in an official briefing, I guess is my point. Probably wise words for any situation, really. So, Justin Bieber, the pop king, is calling a Sydney studio for video. So, a little Sydney design studio has been asked to help make Justin Bieber's new video, which is nice for them. Bieber's got a lot of tattoos these days, not all of them as good as you might think a person of his stature could afford. Okay, Annika Smethurst informs us that 12,000 elderly died on help list. More than 230 older Australians per week die while they wait for government-funded help to stay in their homes. Then we've got the whole of page 5, aside from that just about, is on Phoebe and Sam's split. A strange couple's home sells for $5 million. Well, I'm glad they're taken care of. Shame about everyone else who isn't famous and owns enormous pieces of real estate. Woman inspired by teacher's pet launches sex case. The first of several women on the state's mid-north coast inspired to come forward by the Teacher's Pet podcast, which remember is a News Limited property, has launched legal action against an ex-teacher who she claims was a sexual predator. The woman, who can't legally be named, is suing the teacher, claiming he plied her with alcohol on numerous occasions and preyed upon her sexually while she was a student in the 1970s and 80s. There's going to be a lot of those. Alright, so 2 pages on our brown-skinned man with a terrifying beard, who used to be a terrorist. In 2008, he was jailed a terrorist. Now he says he's changed. They don't say you decide, but it's kind of unspoken. And if you don't believe me, I mean, that's the scale of the brown people, scary beards we're dealing with here. Apparently, police are quietly chuffed, and they describe prison de-radicalisation as a radical answer. Prison de-radicalisation does work, with experts warning Australia simply can't jail its way out of the problem. I wouldn't say de-radicalisation is perfect, but it does appear to have some successes, mostly because some people don't want to spend all of their lives in prison. Page 8 and 9, we have the Right Royal bust-up. This is with Prince Harry, 6th in line of the throne, deciding he doesn't like being a royal in the UK, and is it Meghan's fault? Is it Harry's fault? Is it UK tabloid media, as in the Murdoch papers? No, it's not their fault. Nothing to do with them. Murder plot has been uncovered. Transgender escort refused bail after police phone tap records alleged plan to kill. Well, this has got everything, doesn't it? Transgender escort, who identifies as a woman, allegedly plotted to murder her friend's ex with a fatal dose of the party drug GHB. Marisa Tofeld, whose online profile says she is an entertainer and entrepreneur, told Parramatta Bail Court on Saturday, "It was a conversation I had while on amphetamines, and I don't want to kill anyone," in response to police claims that detectives captured her on a tapped phone call, hatching a plan to kill a Raimondo Korak fan. Mr. Korak fan is currently behind bars with his bail refused on unrelated charges, and is the 30-year-old ex-partner of 28-year-old Claire Dawson from Balmain. Ms. Dawson is also charged with conspiring to murder Mr. Korak fan, and police allege she was on the phone to Ms. Toffield, on December 8 or the following day when they spoke about the alleged murder plan. My word, some people make their lives very complicated, don't they? So Emma, the yellow wiggle of the last 7 years, is doing some work to show deaf kids that their impairment is no barrier to dancing as joyously as anyone else. Apparently revenge was the motive in a Libyan horse raid. The kidnappers' almost 50 horses in Libya, including a direct relative of Farlap and a former Golden Slipper place getter, want revenge rather than a ransom. The Sunday Telegraph has confirmed the horses were taken from the leading Al-Shab stud in the North African country as part of ongoing armed conflict there. A week has passed since the first raid on the leading Libyan horse stud, but the kidnappers have made no ransom demands. Dr. Ahmad Ashab, who owns the stud, which drafted in Australian stallions, said he was being punished for his political links. Well, if you're in a war-torn country where slavery is running rife and you're running a business like a horse stud, it's possible you're a bit tangled up in politics, or at least are the beneficiary of some. The demands do not exist, but rather revenge, because I come from the Sukaljuma region of Tripoli, and I have family relationship with President Fayez al-Sarraj, he said. Dr. Ashab, a veterinarian, said he was devastated at the deaths of 2 horses in the raid and had grave concerns for the rest that were taken. He hopes that the international community can broker the horses' release. You erect monuments for the innocent animals lost to war, he said. I think that's a reference to Australia has monuments to animals in war. Not necessarily this wealthy dude's stud farm, though. Anyway, interesting story. I imagine we'll hear more about that. Okay, so page 13, we refer back to Courtney Partridge McClellan. We have a page on that. Fire asthma killed my sister. Death by poor air quality needs to be known, says Cheryl Partridge. That's the sister. It's very sad, and it's good that they are highlighting that this really bad air quality we are getting because of these unprecedented fires is having huge impacts on people's lives away from the fire front. Okay, the Prime Minister has unveiled $76 million to combat the emotional toll of blazes. There will be extra mental health support for Australians impacted by the bushfire crisis. 2 pages on fires, called Around the State. So noting all the places there are fires. No mention of climate change's impact on the fires so far. Annika Smethurst is noting all the ideas in Kevin Rudd's Summit 2020 that are not, in fact, realities. Now that we're here in 2020 and we're just as disappointing as before. Possibly more disappointing. Famous fasting diet slammed as just an excuse for 5-day junk food binges. The popular 5 and 2 fasting diet has been disowned by the Sydney-based professor whose research underpins it. Too many people using the diet binge on junk food for 5 days and think fasting Tuesdays solves their health problems. He still backs fasting, but said the latest research showed we're making ourselves unhealthy by eating too much protein, and we need to eat healthy all the time, even when we aren't fasting. Police are investigating the suspected use of a drone to spy on George Pell at a maximum security Melbourne jail. Pell has been transferred out of the Melbourne Assessment Prison after the serious security breach was uncovered by corrections authorities. The former Cardinal has been in custody since February last year on child sex offences. The drone was sighted on Thursday, saying it was hovering near a visitor's garden of the CBD prison. Alright, a young Australian actor has died suddenly in LA. Australian actor and rising star Harry Haynes has died in Los Angeles. American actor Jane Badler confirmed her son, best known for his roles in the OA and television series American Horror Story, died on Tuesday. He was 27 and had the world at his feet, but sadly he struggled with mental illness and addiction, she wrote in a social media post. A brilliant spark shone bright, too short a time. I will miss you, Harry, every day of my life. Alright, here's an interesting one. Headline: Victim sex abuse sting. Woman wore bug to meeting with accused 5 years after incident in small town. 2 women took part in a covert police sting where one wore a hidden recording device to collect evidence against a man who had underage sex with them 5 years earlier. The district's court heard the women, who can't be legally identified, were aged 15 years and 2 months and 15 years and 4 months when they had sex with the man in separate encounters on the same day in December 2012 on the New South Wales South Coast. The man was 18 and friends with one of the girl's siblings. In 2015, the now young women decided to report the incident, feeling used by the man, before agreeing to help police officers gather evidence. In January, one of the women wore a hidden recording device to the man's workplace and spoke with him in an unsuccessful attempt to capture confession. In 2017, the man texted the other woman, writing, "I never really had a chance to apologize about all that shit. I'm sorry for everything me or my boys did or said. It's been on my mind a lot, like how young I was, and that, looking back, we were all really stupid doing what we did, and I mean all of us. It wasn't fair on you guys at all." The man was arrested and later pleaded guilty. That seems like an unfortunate case, doesn't it? Okay, Caitlin Hudson O'Farrell is telling us about diving into nature for the perfect modern getaway. This is on page 19, supposedly news, but it turns out this story is in the escape wish list. Right, this is the Lord Howe Island Marine Park. Sounds lovely. Apparently there's a new spray-on chemotherapy. I mean, anything that makes it easier is good. Headline: Barbaro's brother in phone challenge. An accused bikie gang member and brother of a murdered Sydney underworld boss is fighting to overturn his conviction for refusing to give police the PIN code to his phone. Harley Joe Barbaro, 27, a truck driver from the Gold Coast, who police allege is also an associate of a convicted drug trafficker, was found guilty of contravening a police order about information to access his phone in the Southport Magistrate Court in June and was fined $2,500. He claimed he didn't want to give police his phone's password because he didn't want them to see his chats with his lawyer. Barbaro, who has a 4-page criminal history including assault and drug possession, refused to give the PIN to his phone during a search of his home on May 24, where police they would find ice, cocaine and steroids. Didn't say whether they did find them, mind you. He is the brother of murdered Sydney gangster Pasquale Barbaro, killed in a shooting in Sydney in 2016. Barbaro has a previous conviction for contravening a police order to give a password for his phone in August last year. The magistrate, Ms. Baker Smith, argued the magistrate was correct to rule that Barbaro couldn't claim legal professional privilege over the contents of his phone because his phone was never seized by police. She argued for Barbaro's phone to be protected by legal privilege, the phone would have to be used or created solely for the purpose of legal advice. That's an interesting standard. Right, the appeal is set to be heard on March 5. It's always the strangest people who become champions of our causes, but I do think to have legal privilege apply to your phone only if it is for no other purpose than legal advice sounds tenuous to me. Okay, so we've got a wine o'clock warning. Health experts say it's time to put the cork back in on the culture of mums indulging in self-care by drinking several glasses of wine each day. It's just functional alcoholism, for God's sake. I mean, I'm all for calling it out for what it is. Yeah, it's functional alcoholism. It's not just mums, is it? How to save $1,000 on your grocery bill. Filling your trolley after dinner or at other times when you are not hungry lessens the likelihood of impulse buys. Evening shoppers could also often take advantage of end-of-day specials and price reductions, so that's buying old meat, which is often better meat in some ways, but it's an indication your life's on a difficult path, and certainly I've been there. Right, online casino gambling gambit. War veterans and Indigenous leaders are rolling the dice for the rights to legalise and own the nation's $4 billion online casino gambling sector. Similar to the lucrative Native American casino industry, Indigenous Australians and returned servicemen and women believe money from online gaming could help prevent high suicide rates and alleviate poverty. It'll be more about making themselves filthy rich. Apparently 5 RSL clubs in Queensland and the Aboriginal Development Benefit Trust have created a proposal. I'm not sure why veterans and Indigenous people are on the same page. I noticed Scott Morrison started putting welcome to veterans in with his welcome to acknowledgements of country. Don't get me wrong, I have an immense amount of respect for this country's veterans. It's just how we create privileged legal status and whether it's on a par with being Indigenous. Apparently, Australia is uncorking the grapes of wrath. Australia has stepped up its fight to keep the name Prosecco on bottles of locally produced sparkling wine as Europe demands a ban as part of a trade deal. The federal government will pour $100,000 into the diplomatic row, funding a team of legal academics to help mount a new defence to keep the tipple's name. This is a relatively late, since 2010, change to the setup in Italy where Prosecco is now a region and not a variety. It's actually relatively recent for the grape-growing region in northeastern Italy to be called the Prosecco region. I still think it's trying to sound like it's an Italian white wine, and there's no reason our clever marketing bods can't come up with something, is there? So page 29, page 28 being an ad for Commonwealth Bank and how lovely they are and how helpful they're going to be in the fires, is when Barnsey met the tech titan and lent him his own tent to camp in. The man who created GoPro desperately wants to get in touch with Jimmy Barnes and blow his mind. Entrepreneur Nick Woodman, who attended the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas this week to promote his company's latest action cameras, told the Sunday Telegraph about his surprise connection to rock royalty formed after a chance encounter in 2002. The pair met at Seal Rocks on the New South Wales mid-north coast during Woodman's now famous 5-month surfing trip that inspired his multi-million-dollar camera brand. At the time, the 26-year-old Californian inventor was trying to create a basic camera that he and his friends could use to film themselves surfing, and he planned to start the business before he's 30. Apparently, they got along really well on the rocks. Now, apparently, I wouldn't have thought Jimmy Barnes was that hard to get in touch with. But here you go. Maybe Jimmy doesn't want to talk to this dude. Although, now that he knows this dude has tons of money, maybe they'll rekindle the friendship. So apparently there's a real organic formula for fortunes in China. Chili-infused honey, organic wine, and organic baby products and insect repellents. Some of the Australian brands now pushing into the consumer consciousness of hundreds of millions of Chinese. Aussie actress Nikki Whelan flew into the Magic Millions race day on the Gold Coast straight from promoting her latest movie alongside Bruce Willis. Lucky her. Lucky Magic Millions. And a man is in a critical condition after being stabbed multiple times at a unit block in Sydney South. Police say he was stabbed at a property on Bay Street, Brighton Le Sands. It is not yet clear what led to the assault. The Snitch, which is our law and order gossip. As if the budget dramas at the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions weren't biting hard enough, now news has dropped that the state's top prosecutor will not be working until August. Chris Maxwell QC told staff on December 11 that he would be taking long service leave, which would see him out of the office for 8 months. Well, it seems reasonable, and it's why you have bureaucracies to cover these positions. A tiff over who looked better in a pair of jeans led to controversial ex-reality TV star Susie Taylor being arrested and booted out of her Gold Coast bail address. Taylor, 49, was on bail for allegedly extorting and assaulting a Tinder date, but was rearrested after a disturbance at her cousin's Currumbin home, where she was living as part of strict Supreme Court bail conditions. Wearing a tight green mini dress, the dishevelled-looking Taylor, a former Penthouse centrefold and contestant on The Block, yesterday fronted Southport Magistrates Court, where she pleaded guilty to 2 counts of breaching bail. Defence lawyer Michael Gatenby told the court Taylor's cousin became jealous over who looked better in a pair of jeans and ratted on Taylor about not staying at her bail address. She, the cousin, told police she hadn't lived there for some time, Mr. Gatenby told the court. Magistrate Pamela Dowse fined Taylor $300 but did not record a conviction. Taylor told Waiting Media she had lost a little bit of weight in prison, so needed a new pair of jeans. There we go. Richard Buttrose, having spent 9 years in jail, you'd think he wouldn't want anything to do with the legal system, but then again, if you can't beat him, join him. The nephew of media powerhouse Ita Buttrose claimed his first triumph at the bar table this week in a David and Goliath-style battle in the Land and Environment Court. Buttrose represented fellow Vaucluse resident Bruce Davidson in a neighbourhood dispute with a new kid on the block property developer Jianku Zhang. Mr. Zhang, who paid $5 million for his daily Ave home in 2014, went to the court to seek orders that Mr. Davidson trim his trees continuously. Given a covenant would affect the property value, he was up for a fight. Buttrose, who was jailed in 2010 for supplying cocaine around the eastern suburbs, reckoned he had a reasonable grasp, but also took up the legal mantle. I was teaching myself how to do it along the way. I think I wanted to win more than my client did, and Bruce really wanted to win, he said. On Friday, the court dismissed Mr. Zhang's application. Buttrose, who finishes parole later this year, is claiming the win as one for the little guy. Just don't call him a lawyer. I don't pretend to be. I'm a legal advocate who acts as an agent, he said. So a police officer accused of leaking video footage of 2 prisoners having sex in a watch house has been promoted, despite still being under investigation. So apparently pet prenups are now a thing for when things get rough, R-U-F-F. So apparently pet custody is more and more an issue in couples breaking up, which... been there. Skirting through sport, Ian Chappell thinks we can have 4-day test matches because David Warner hits runs so fast, which I'm not sure changing the essential structure of the game around the performance of one particular player is a brilliant idea. But that's what we've got. Oh, hang on, more on the Fires. Okay, so buried in page 78 and 79, we mentioned the wildlife and the toll of the fires on the wildlife. Mentioning that they're using the number 1 to 1.25 billion animals dead in the fires. Fish are included. The devastating bushfires are even killing fish. Kangaroo Islands threatened species are in battle for survival. Okay, so we should leave out as feed sweet potato, carrots, and leafy vegetables. In world news, Adele, the very fine singer, has apparently lost 45 kilograms. And they now have a picture of a skinny Adele sitting on a beach through what looks like a very long-range telephoto lens. She's been on vacation with Harry Styles. Also in world news, David Drummond, the legal chief of Google parent company Alphabet, is leaving at the end of the month, following accusations of inappropriate relationships with employees. Right, Northern Ireland's rival parties have agreed to back a new power-sharing deal to revive its government for the first time since 2017, which they're going to need now that they don't have a whip hand in Westminster for Brexit and the hideous effects it could have on Northern Ireland. So good on them for Seeing some sense there. Right, now we've got page 81 is a huge American flag with Donald Trump standing in front of it, talking about the imminent threat on 4 embassies. The stories have been changing a lot as to how imminent the threat was. This is in relation to the murder of Iranian General Soleimani. I also kind of note that the American government doesn't really care about people dying of gunfire incidents in the US every day. They don't care about people dying of opioid addictions. They don't care about Americans dying of homelessness or domestic violence. So it's weird how the sanctity of American life suddenly leaps to the fore when they want to murder someone in the Middle East to protect oil interests. It's almost like there's not a single coherent standard at play. And apparently another Iranian commander has been targeted. If you're not doing it, you just tell them, and it has a fair effect, doesn't it? The United Kingdom has formally requested the extradition of the wife of an American diplomat who left the country last year after a fatal car accident. British prosecutors are seeking the extradition of Anne Sarkoulas, 42, over the crash last August in which Harry Dunn, 19, was killed while riding his motorbike. The Home Office has sent an extradition request to the US. This is now a decision for the US authorities. This is interesting. It's taken a lot of campaigning for the UK government to move in ways that displease the Americans, although I think most Americans would be quite keen for their diplomats to face trial for causing death. Dems advance on Trump. Presidential impeachment charges set for Senate next week. I wonder what else the president will do. All right, Hollywood is lending a voice to protests. That's always been helpful. Jane Fonda, also great success of the protesting, was joined by fellow Hollywood stars Joaquin Phoenix, Susan Sarandon, and Martin Sheen in a protest at the US Capitol building in Washington where they demanded action on climate change. Look, I'm all in favour of climate change. No, I'm not. I'm all in favour of action against climate change. Part of me does wonder if the same people who've been protesting things unsuccessfully for 50 years are really that much a help in the fight. But it's better than not getting help in the fight, I suppose. Right, so our Stella magazine, the glossy lift out that I've skirted past, is inserting its renovation trends into the body of the paper. Okay, now we come to opinion. Piers Ackerman tells us the whining critics prefer to apply hot air than facts when fanning their climate hysteria. Next time you hear someone from News Limited say, oh, we're not climate denialists, ask them why Piers Ackerman still has a column. Facts do matter, but not to those rapidly pushing the false claim that climate change is the sole issue in the debate raging over the coals of the current devastating bushfires. No one claims it's the sole issue, Piers. But given that it controls the dryness of the bush and the severity of the drought, and given that it also affects the temperatures which enable the fires to burn so wildly and the dry conditions, the low humidity, it's a bit of a biggie, isn't it, Piers? Annika Smethurst is talking about how much she loves the royal family. Headline, oh Harry, you are so Gen Y. Nothing the oldies who frequent the Sunday Telegraph like as much as slagging off a younger generation, any younger generation. Annika says, I love the royal family. It's not based on any crusading ideological bent of monarchism. I think it's the history and the hats and the well-dressed children. This doesn't stop me being a Republican. Yeah, you're being a real great Republican there. Oh, well-dressed children. Oh, it's amazing what you can do with millions of pounds, isn't it? Your children can be very smartly turned out. And, of course, the aides and footmen and ladies in waiting to do the hard work of getting the children looking as they should. While my head says Republican, my heart thumbs Windsor. Ugh. Now, this is mostly about Annika having tea with a minor royal that she can't name and then talking about her own sparkling conversation. Right, and also Annika had low productivity on the day of the Megxit announcement. More on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And then, look, we've got Peter Credlin. She's been cut down to 3/4 of a page. She won't be happy about that. Turning a blind eye to burning necessity. After every disaster, it's important to learn the right lessons. These are the lessons Peter wants you to learn, not any other lessons you might have drawn conclusions from. There's hardly been a bushfire crisis that hasn't led to an inquiry, and we always ignore them, don't we, Peter? Because they say things your coal mining mates don't like. And each and every one of the subsequent reports has concluded there must be better management of fuel loads if catastrophic fires are to be avoided, which is very hard to do with climate change extending the fire season. You'll also find nearly every government of the day moved quickly to accept the report's recommendations, but there's a big difference between accepting the recommendations and actually implementing them. This we agree. This is where the rubber really hits the road, as over time ministers get moved on, governments change, and the bureaucracy moves to reassert its dominance over public policy. Those evil bureaucrats who get in the way of you and your coal mining buddies, Peter. Peter's giving a thumbs up to Shane Warne for giving up his baggy green hat to raise $1 million for bushfire victims via the Red Cross. And a thumbs down to Harry and Meghan. Surely the Queen deserved better. Sunday Telegraph editorial is talking again about Muslim de-radicalisation or terrorist de-radicalisation, and they're justifying telling the story because they don't actually believe that de-radicalisation works. And the Telegraph is once again calling for a republic. I don't know if it's directly linked to many senior roles talking about the need to address climate change in the context of Australia's bushfire emergency. I think it might help nudge the needle a little bit, though. Warren's cartoon is making a joke about Peter Dutton being a potato and dropping him on the fire zone, possibly because of the sweet potatoes for feeding the wildlife. The Health Hacker has a cricket player and some fast facts. Bombshell with Charlize Theron, Nicole Kidman and Margot Robbie gets 4 stars. There's a go-kart racing movie starring Richard Roxburgh that gets 3. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is Tom Hanks talking about the movie about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show, is getting 4 stars. And The Biggest Little Farm gets 3.5. And we're still trying to flog HarperCollins books. Yep, Clancy of the Overflow by Jackie French. HarperCollins being owned by the Murdoch family. It's always a HarperCollins book that gets a whole page, sometimes more. Pussycat Dolls have reformed, intent on leaving the tensions of the past behind, or just earning some money. Angela Mollard is saying how much she likes the Duchess of Cambridge as opposed to the Duchess of Sussex. Nothing racial in there. Duncan Lay is laughing at the Cats movie, which is a dated cultural reference. Which that's the Duncan Lay column for you. Dated cultural references, something to keep the fogies vaguely in touch and disapproving. So Rebel Wilson has been at the Magic Millions. It's nice to know. And the back page is devoted to Bombshell, which does have Margot Robbie, Nicole Kidman, and Charlize Theron. Here we go. Look at our Nicole, still looking good, but pancaked. So the climate change denial rolls on, despite News Limited saying that they're not climate change deniers. Are we surprised? No. Some inherent racism about terror de-radicalisation, although it's a complex issue that does need addressing. I'm not sure it's addressed well here, but can't criticise them too much for trying. So that's the Sunday Telegraph for another week. Thank you so much for watching all this way. Do please tell your friends who you think might be interested. It is important to keep your eye on what your crazy older relatives are talking about, and this way you don't have to pay for the paper. Thanks very much. Hopefully I will see you next week.